Welcome back to our daily Silicon Bites. That's a review of the news taking place. And of course, it is a fire hydrant of news at the moment. It's difficult to know which story to choose. But I think one of the most important ones at the moment is this story about the Ministry of Efficiency eviscerating US governance and US government institutions. Before we jump in, thank you to everyone who has been supporting us for our trip to Ukraine. We've almost closed the budget on that one and are busy paying off the final costs of the film cruise, the travel, the expenses, and so on. We have about a dozen videos to publish onto the channel, including what I think is one of the best interviews we've recorded in 3 years. These will all be coming up in the coming days and weeks. That is something hopefully you will get value from and look forward to. If you do want to help the work of the channel, if you do want to help support future events we are planning, and we are planning to do a lot more events this year, then please do buy me a coffee, go to Patreon and do help out. It is absolutely invaluable. Your support and your help makes all of this possible. Now let's get into the story. Under the guise of bringing efficiency and transparency to governance in the US is a coup actually underway. An administrative takeover, a crypto coup by the leading luminary of the tech brotherhood, Elon Musk. A nihilistic revolution eviscerating US government institutions. Some are starting to see patterns that indicate a hijack of the federal government is in progress and being conducted virtually unchallenged. You perhaps thought that Trump won after 2016 was chaotic, then buckle up because 2025 will be far wilder and far stranger. The newly created Department of Government Efficiency under Elon Musk is increasingly starting to look like an Orwellian choice of names. For efficiency, read demolition of the basic functions of government and a paralysis in the process of governance. Barely has the inauguration passed, and attempts to decimate the federal civil service are well in hand, but the consequences are being felt on a global scale. And we just saw, as with the suspension of US aid, that it will affect many hundreds of millions of people outside the US, not just US citizens. Members from the Department of Government Efficiency are apparently pushing for full access to payment systems and intend to scrape data from within the Department of Treasury. Unelected engineers, led by an unelected figure, Musk, will have access to the most sensitive data throughout government. Cloud Software Group CEO Tom Krause has been designated liaison between the Treasury and the Department of Government Efficiency. The plan is becoming clearer about the form of this takeover. Musk reportedly wants to add the Treasury to blockchain and enable all government payments to potentially be made through cryptocurrency. Agents from the Department of Government Efficiency have demanded access to classified info with USAID, following on from the dramatic pause in USAID programs this week. We're mainly going to look at the impact within the US, but we also have to ask the question, is that data safe? Could sensitive data about the recipients of US aid funding, all of the details, their grant programs, their activities, their employees, could these things be leaked to hostile governments or even the regimes in the case of Georgia, which they are fighting to oppose? That is an open question. It's one that we will revisit in the coming days and weeks. So is this a friendly or a hostile move? For those that seem to think this is a pause to reevaluate programs for 90 days only, there may be a rude awakening. Musk and Doge seem intent on abolishing the department, making any continuation of programs far less likely. Musk has called the agency a criminal organization, declaring it's time for US aid to die. Another tweet attributed to him claims that US aid has funded bioweapons. This is an utterly absurd claim. Civil servants have been offered buyouts to leave their positions early, but no federal funds have been appropriated for these offers. Could Trump start to treat federal workers the way he is alleged to sometimes treat contractors for the Trump organization, i.e. unpaid invoices, cheated? These actions are taking place amid an alleged purge of high-ranking officials also within the FBI. Some commentators are raising the alarm and likening this to a hostile takeover of the federal government being carried out in an unprecedented fashion by a private agency operating with a broad, ambiguous mandate, no checks and balances, and an entity that seems to have no concern for the stability of the United States or care for its foreign policy. It's easier to break than it is to build, says Alexander Vindman. And Elon Musk's agenda is focused on unraveling America's governing institutions. Elon Musk is causing damage at such a rate, it's not clear how long it'll take to clean the mess up, or even if that'll be possible. The new role of the so-called tech bros in Trump's administration became clear at his inauguration when they were gifted front row seats. More surprisingly still, at the inauguration was CEO of TikTok, Xiao Chu, head of a company labeled illegal by Biden in the US market. Of course, the convergence of money and politics isn't new. There is a strong tradition in the US of struggling against vested interests and their undue influence on governance and even on the neutrality of the judicial system. What's new seems to be the hostility to the nation state that has been fostered within the elite of Silicon Valley. Biden made a hard-hitting speech, the last of his presidency, where he described the United States as an oligarchy. He described his fears about the dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a very few ultra-wealthy people. In his speech, Biden adapted President Dwight D. Eisenhower's warning from 1961 about the military-industrial complex to raise the alarm about a tech-industrial complex. Very quickly, the influence of the mega-rich on the incoming Trump administration became clear. At least 13 billionaires are lined up to have government posts under Trump. That makes the cabinet worth at least $7 billion, double that of his own first term, 60 times more than the net worth of the outgoing Biden administration. One must ask, in whose financial interests will policies be framed and executed? I doubt whether it is the interests of the majority of Americans. The growth of billionaires is a defining feature of modern America, while the middle and working classes seem to be getting squeezed in terms of quality of life, income, and status. In 1990, there were about 60 billionaires. By 2000, there were 298. Today, there are almost 750 of them. Mega celebrity is now reserved for the centi billionaires, not for your common and garden billionaire class. Of the top 10 centi billionaires in the US, all but one, Warren Buffett, made their money in the tech sector that has boomed since the turn of the millennium. But what does Silicon Valley want, if that question can even be asked of a diverse set of people? Guardian columnist Marina Hyde lists the typical demands: a beneficial tax regime, regulation that serves their interests, paths cleared to mergers and acquisitions, the crushing of the antitrust efforts, and AI constraints, removing all barriers to that development. But for them to win, their labour force needs to be kept in check. The power of advocacy for labour rights must be curtailed. So likely demands will also include decreased share of profits to labour, lower corporate and personal income taxes. Unto the rich shall be given more, and the meek will have an even smaller piece of the pie. Then there is largesse from federal contracts, which Musk's bank balance has long benefited from. The convergence of corporate and political power seems to be something quite familiar from 20th century US history. But is there more to it this time? There are hints of something more radical, claims Marina. The same Silicon Valley figures who will share the podium with Trump have long professed a basic antagonism towards the state. Some in their circle, such as the venture capitalist Balaji Srinivasan, have even laid out detailed blueprints for the exiting of the nation state, including the creation of new private polities or network states. In 2009, Thiel fantasized about cracking up the world into thousands of new nations. If we want to increase freedom, he said, we want to increase the number of countries. Musk's first actions to eviscerate US government institutions and smash US aid fit well into this pattern, but there is a problem, which Ukrainians will immediately spot. If Russia and China are broken apart into many constituent nations and other large blocs such as India fragment, then this idea may have some potential, but they would need to reconstitute into security alliances and blocs that more effectively represent their global interests. But there is no evidence that the major power blocs, and especially the imperialistic ones such as Russia and China, are likely to break apart at all. In fact, they will actively resist that process. If Western nations become atomized in this way and throw off the so-called shackles of the nation states they exist within, then they will simply make themselves into food for the big, hungry beasts of geopolitics. You're either at the table or you're on the menu. At least this seems to be a conception of the world that both Trump and Putin share. Some of these oligarchs seem not particularly tied to the legacy of the United States at all, or to the advancement of democratic values around the world. There is little evidence either of a religious underpinning to their visions, something the evangelical right seem not yet to have realized. Elon Musk has become deeply embedded in Trump's White House after declaring the US is in a financial emergency while on the campaign trail. Notwithstanding the fact that Biden left a relatively healthy economy behind him, low inflation, and buoyant jobs market, Musk is leading the so-called Doge Department of Government Efficiency, aiming to rip the waste out of the US's $6.5 trillion budget. But the capricious and chaotic way these reforms are being carried out, as well as the pronouncements of trade wars with allies, are adding to fears that the Trump administration is dangerously undermining the US dollar. Now Musk has confirmed he wants to put the US Treasury on a blockchain, the technology that underpins Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, including Musk's pet project, Dogecoin. The New York Times has claimed Trump's Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent handed Doge Department officials access to the payment system, which sends out money to the tune of $5 trillion per year on behalf of the entire federal government. There seemed to be no constitutional nor contractual basis for such a bold step, and this massive transfer of access to sensitive data seems neither to have undergone the standard validation processes, security checks, or due diligence. Critics claim this amounts to an administrative coup in plain sight. The Department of Government Efficiency has been given access to the federal payment system, exposing the sensitive personal data of millions of Americans, as well as details of public contractors who compete directly with Musk's own businesses, an influential US senator has confirmed. Ron Wyden, a Democratic senator from Oregon and the ranking member of the Senate Finance Committee, added that the data bonanza included Social Security and Medicare benefits, grants, payments to government contractors, all of it. It was reported that the Treasury Department's top civil servant had retired after more than 30 years of service. David Librick had clashed with Musk associates over their efforts to effectively break into the system. Until now, the information stored in it has been exceptionally closely guarded, but members of Musk's Doge team have been battering to be given access. According to the New York Times, Librick was placed on administrative leave after he objected to Doge agents being given access. Wyden warned that any politically motivated meddling in these systems risks severe damage to our country and the economy. I can think of no good reason why political operators who have demonstrated a blatant disregard for the law would need access to these sensitive, mission-critical systems. And back to USAID, which is another early indicator of the deviation from convention, constitutionality, and good governance which the US administration is taking. Elon Musk said President Trump agreed the US Agency for International Development needs to be shut down after its funding was frozen and dozens of its employees were put on leave. With regards to the US aid stuff, I went over it with the president, said Musk, in detail, and he agreed that we should shut it down. Musk said this in an X Spaces conversation early last Monday. He then said, without offering any evidence to back up his assertions, that it has until now been run by a bunch of radical lunatics, and we're getting them out, and then we'll make a decision on its future. Musk called USAID incredibly partisan politically and said it had been supporting radically left causes throughout the world, including things that are anti-American. Of course, he said all this without proffering any evidence at all. This is the America First agenda in action. It is not evidence-led, but it is populist-led. It's appealing to emotions, memes, sound bites, and unfortunately, misinformation as well. It's confrontational, chaotic, and crude. Musk said US aid is beyond repair, among other attacks he made against the agency created by Congress as an independent body. We don't have an apple with a worm in it, he said. US aid is a ball of worms. USAID was established in 1961 under President John F. Kennedy's administration and is the US government's humanitarian arm. It dispenses billions of dollars annually across the world to alleviate poverty, treat diseases, and respond to famines and natural disasters. It also promotes democracy building and development by supporting non-governmental organizations, independent media, and social initiatives. Now, these are classical US foreign policy objectives. In an era of consensus, much of this funding was not seen as controversial, and it was not even seen as partisan. Two top security officials at USAID were put on administrative leave Saturday night for refusing Doge personnel access to systems at the agency, even when they threatened to call law enforcement. Multiple sources familiar with that situation told the CNN network. Around 60 senior US aid staff were put on leave last week on accusations of attempting to circumvent Trump's executive order to freeze foreign aid for 90 days. Another senior official was put on leave for trying to reverse that move after finding no evidence of wrongdoing. Musk also branded the US Agency for International Development a criminal organization. Well, who else approves of this? Who else talks like this? For one, there is Dmitry Medvedev, the alcohol-soaked, genocide-loving former Prime Minister of Russia. Putin's propagandists have also applauded the move, and I'm sure China is broadly supportive. In fact, China is making noises to the effect that it will step in to support some of the causes that the US has abandoned. There is no such thing as a vacuum in geopolitics, it seems. Well, what could be the outcome of this? It's too early to understand all the ramifications, both within the US and externally, but some short-term consequences could be lawsuits that seek to address the allegedly unconstitutional and illegal manner that this has happened, especially as it pertains to data breaches. 3 federal employee unions have accused the Treasury Department of giving Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency unlawful access to sensitive information. In a lawsuit filed Monday, lawyers acting for the Alliance for Retired Americans, the American Federation of Government Employees, and the Service Employees International Union said Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent violated federal law when he shared departmental data with Doge. Federal laws protect sensitive personal and financial information from improper disclosure and misuse, including by barring disclosure to individuals who lack a lawful and legitimate need for it, the lawyers wrote. In his first week as Treasury Secretary, Defendant Bessent violated these restrictions. The scale of the intrusion into individuals' privacy is massive and unprecedented, the lawsuit continued. People who must share information with the federal government should not be forced to share information with Elon Musk or his Doge. And federal law says they do not have to, the lawsuit added. Government by chaos and intimidation has consequences. Shattered security, economic wealth, broken alliances, and lowering of trust are perhaps long-term outcomes. Massive lawsuits that incur unnecessary costs may be the short-term consequences of the crypto coup that is taking place in Washington. Thank you for listening to this video. If you got to the end, thank you also for your support. Do please make sure you like this video, share it, check you are subscribed, and do please, if you're able to, check out Patreon and buy me a coffee to help support the work of the channel. Thank you.